I'd like to pick up on something that Dick said. Dick and I go back a long time together. And we have in our society supposedly a democracy. We like to talk about democratic processes. I have yet to find any democracy in medicine. I don't even find democracy in education. Now think of this for a moment, unless you're in some private school that advocates a more advanced and a more reasoned way of teaching. Where I went to school, at my graduate level and at my doctorate level, I was informed repeatedly by my doctoral committee, who were ultra-orthodox in their various sciences, one in biochemistry, one in nutritional physiology, and I had to master all those because my doctorate was in human nutrition and public health science. So I had to do all those different sciences. That if I could not convince them that what I knew equaled what they knew in the same way they knew it, I couldn't justify passing. And I thought that becoming a doctorate was to show that you could master something that was unique and make an original contribution. Had nothing to do with contribution. Had to do with appeasing their egos. And it took me back to when I was in high school and college. Anytime I would question the teacher would make it very clear if I challenged them again, I would fail. And as a result, very quickly you start to realize to say the right answers, to appease people. Then I have to ask, well, if the whole purpose of education is to regurgitate back in some form what the teacher expects us to know that they've given us, then where is the freedom of thought? Where's the freedom to challenge? I thought the learning process necessitates challenging preconceived notions. So when education becomes orthodox, it ceases being true education. It is nothing more than an academic dogma. That's right. And that has nothing to do with learning. That has everything to do with indoctrination. So I'm very aware why I don't trust people from Harvard, MIT, Yale, and Princeton. Because I'm wondering how many of those people would have gone to their doctors had they had the courage to challenge everyone at every level if they thought that what was right was more important than trying to be right. And I think that when you look around, as Michio Kaku is a good example. How often have you seen him being one of the spokespersons for the environment on, for instance, Nightline? Recently I saw Rush Limbaugh as an expert environmentalist. Now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm the one that's been sleeping too long. But I would have thought that Michio is an expert on the environment, and that Rush, now, I've been around in the environmental movement since 1963, and I didn't see Rush anywhere. Did you all see him? Did we miss him? He's not easy to miss, all five of them, right? And it's nice in America to have an infomercial program every hour where all you do is self-promote and self-aggrandize and make sure you don't have any debate. But when do we allow people whose views would truly challenge our thoughts? I had something strange happen once. I was teaching the college here in New York City. I've taught at several, and the new school. And I had students that wouldn't come into the classroom. They sat outside. And I said, is there any way I can help this process? Any way that we can communicate? He said, no, we don't need to communicate with you. We're going to get passed no matter what. I said, well, I didn't think that was possible. It was possible. They did pass. Even though I failed them, they passed. The school overrode me. The politics I've seen in education was so disheartening, I just stepped away from that form of education. I stopped trying to convince and change that system. When I would go to medical conferences, when I was invited by New York Medical College for years to present information to the medical students, and I would go with volumes, I went prepared. I would have minimum 20,000 studies from peer-reviewed journals on every aspect of nutrition as a preventative for disease or curative of disease or deficiencies causing disease. I would set them up there. The students would ask really interesting and appropriate questions, and halfway through this whole process, one of the professors would start interjecting. Mind you, I only had an hour, and he had the whole year and every day, and he couldn't give me my hour. And then he would get very offended that, you're giving people misinformation. This is quackery. I mean, everyone in the alternative field is quackery. You're all pseudoscientific. I said, I'm sorry. Let me ask you, is this about science not being honored? Is this about medicine not being honored? Is this about public health not being honored? Or is this about your ego not being honored? Now, I said, I'm willing not to honor your ego, but I always honored real science. I am a scientist. I've been a scientist for years, 20 years in the Institute of Applied Biology. Yet I never see my research ever accepted by anyone within orthodoxy. And that's what's interesting, because I've never met a healthy doctor. I've never met a healthy bureaucrat. Never in my life. I've never even met a healthy lawyer. That's good. The fewer the better. There are a few. There are 3 in the world that we know of. And unfortunately, here these medical students, just no different than the other students in school, that whatever the medical school says, they will go by. Now, did you ever notice what they do? Do we have any medical students here in the room? Any? Any doctors? Medical doctors? I see. Any nutritionists? I see. Isn't this interesting? We have no one in this room who could take this out and help change society at the power level. They're the least interested in this information. And that's true everywhere where I lecture. So I stopped trying. I learned the lesson. You cannot push a rope up a hill. They are absolutely reticent to any new information. Isn't it interesting that each year about 50,000 Americans die of malnutrition in hospitals, and yet the dietitians who will prepare those meals and the doctors and the dietitians who fix those meals still want the official authority by law in every one of the states to be the only people who can call themselves a nutritionist or offer information, and in 27 states they have that power? I got to ask you, if I had a driving school where 50,000 of my students each year while I was in the car got in an accident and died, I think someone would say, Gary, you're not a very good driving instructor. No one asked them the same thing. Does that make any sense to you? And so when I show a doctor, I said, how much information do you need before you'll take a look that vitamin C can help a person who has AIDS? You were talking about the scab phenomena. You're absolutely right. It's a beautiful metaphor. Well, what the body needs to encourage that scab is nutrients that have been depleted through a lifetime of abuse. That the body is so toxic, the intestine is toxic, the liver is toxic, the brain is toxic, the glands are toxic, the adrenals are exhausted, the thymus. Yes, they have it in their medical textbook. The thymus is a useless appendage organ after the age of puberty, and it shrivels and atrophies. They're absolutely right in them. But what happens when you take an aging rat, which has been done, and you give it thymus extract, and it rejuvenates back to a 20-year-old rat? That has also been done. So when we start giving thymus extract to people whose immune systems are defective, suddenly they start manifesting a biochemical reaction and an energy reaction as a young person. And you take a person who has adequate T cells, and that's what your thymus does. It gives you T cells, which protects your immune system against foreign agents, against bacteria and viruses. And now the person no longer has the same level of fatigue. They no longer have the same level of opportunistic infection. They no longer have the same cancer because the body produces more and natural killer cell activity when you feed it. But we never feed the immune system. We only feed our appetite. Now, if you fed your immune system, if you fed your adrenals, you said, I don't have enough energy in the morning. I want my adrenals, add on to the renal. Renals are kidneys. 2, sit right here. When those adrenals are fed, what do they need? They need vitamin C. There's more vitamin C in the adrenal than any other part of the body. There's more pantothenic acid in the adrenal medulla than any other part of the body. When the adrenals have pantothenic acid and vitamin C, you don't need a cup of coffee. You don't need sugar. You don't need any unnatural stimulant. You'll have a natural energy level that will sustain you throughout the day. What do we see now on commercials? You talk about not finding an apple on commercials. We now show parents having their children wake up and mother presenting them with a cup of coffee in bed. Seen that commercial? Yeah. My doctoral dissertation was on caffeineism. My clinical work was on caffeineism. With 1 cup of coffee a day, you can cause pathogenic activity in the body. 1 cup. The average teenager drinks more caffeine than the average adult because they're taking it in the form of chocolate and in the form of cola. Cola drinkers, generally in season, will have 5 times the amount of caffeine as an adult. Now, what about the caffeine drinker that also, in beverages like sodas, that also drinks coffee? You can easily have upwards of 500 to 600 milligrams of caffeine in your system. That's acute caffeineism, irritability, hyperactivity. You take a kid that gets up in the morning and has a cola and potato chips before they go to school. They sit in school, they can't focus. They feel antsy. They feel overwhelmed. And they're told that something's wrong with them, so they're sent down to the school psychologist, who then says that you have a learning disability. You're minimally brain dysfunctional, or you're hyperactive, so we'll give you Ritalin. We have an epidemic of prescription of Ritalin. I never see the FDA ever complaining about the drugs that we give people. I didn't see the commissioner of the FDA when we were committing a form of medical genocide in this country on women in the 1960s and 70s by telling every woman who went to her doctor and said, "Doctor, I'm having these problems. I have sweats at night, I have cramps, I have some mood swings." The doctor examines and says, "There's nothing wrong with you. It's in your mind." The woman says, "You're wrong. I feel this." Now, you can't feel it. I mean, who's the doctor? Whose name's on the door? Where did you get your medical degree? I don't have a medical degree. I'm just a person. But trust me, I can't trust you. Doctors aren't in business to trust people. The doctor doesn't hold a sacred confession with you. You do with the doctor. You treat a doctor better than you treat a priest. And so now the doctor gives their benediction to you and gives you Valium. Hundreds of millions of prescriptions for a useless drug. Look at the medical indications. Less than 1% of the people who receive Valium actually had a medically valid need for it. That meant we were drugging a whole nation, disempowering them. But then again, that shouldn't be unusual, because medicine has never considered the woman's body natural to begin with. It's a disease. That's why they band together to prevent nurse midwifery, homeopathy, chiropractic, nutrition, orthomolecular psychiatry, and, of course, the very powerful use of naturopathics. And even to this day, they don't recognize it. So you give them the documentation, they don't want to see it. You give them 1,000 studies, they'll say they need 1,000 more. It never ends. So where I come from, Dick, I stopped talking with the medical community. If they want to ask me something, I'm happy to answer. I no longer try to prove our case. I no longer try to prove to the media. I no longer try to prove to the media that they're part of the problem of disease in America. You know, it's interesting. The media will never show pornography, or what considers pornography, or something sexually explicit, but it'll show people getting killed, and that's entertainment. It'll show children on Saturday morning eating junk food without any responsibility for what's going to happen to the brains and bodies of those children, creating disease that we can now attribute diabetes and arthritis and heart disease in children. They'll consider that ethical. I have to question the ethics then of all the networks and the people who work there and the people who own it and the people who have stock in it. I have to question, how can people make money off someone else's disease? And yet in America, that's the biggest money being made, off disease. The stocks and the companies that offer new drugs. The biggest scams of all are in the pharmaceutical area of cancer. You mentioned cancer. Misha mentioned cancer. I just finished a documentary on cancer. 6 years in the making. It's going to come out. I'm going to have a showing in about 5 to 6 weeks. We're in our final editing now. I had people on that are never invited on any other media. Never. Why not? Because the message they have to tell is the story that no one in the mainstream wants to tell. Fritz Perls said it best. A fear of knowing is a fear of doing. I would have, just this past week I saw, I think it was Tom Brokaw, who was showing one of these, I think it was Indiana or Michigan, maybe some of you saw this, sovereign citizen groups, people, the local militia, they were out there training. And of course it made them look like they were extremists, they were going to fight the American government. And I stepped back for a moment and I thought about something. I said, well, let's take a look. In October of 1989, I published an article that exposed for the first time the American government had done over 300 experiments, as of now it stands over 1,000 experiments, without people's knowledge or consent, with low-level radiation and higher levels of radiation, feeding them radioactive toast in a hospital to see how long it would take and to what degree it would destroy their kidneys. I actually saw what the protocols were, why they were giving it. I saw experiments where they had a ship go up and down the coast of California and San Francisco and give off a serobacterium. Billions and billions of these bacteria went into the air. People in one of the hospitals developed an infection and died from this rare bacteria. It was already in the literature at that time that bacteria could kill. In New York City, they took a special type of car, it was a Volkswagen, and they had exhaust that when it went through the tunnels, they gave off the bacteria. They had light bulbs that were filled with bacteria they crushed to see in subways the dispersion factor. They released whooping cough bacteria from airplanes over Florida. We checked and saw at the time that the incidence of whooping cough and deaths from whooping cough increased just at that point. It peaked up and then it peaked down. And no other time was that peak there. Hundreds and hundreds of experiments on humans. We see where they irradiate our food. We see where they lie about every one of these things and covered up from the American public. Even a recent committee of the CIA on how to be less secret ended up classifying the report. And we see the people in office today at every level. In the media, we don't see populists. We see elitists. In the government, we see no populists. We see elitists. The reformers are co-opted very quickly. So I got to ask you, if you've spent the last 40 years drinking polluted water, living near major toxic dump sites, having denial by every major corporation that their dioxin, their heptachlors, all of the electromagnetic pulses are causing the leukemia in your children, when you see that our sovereignty was just sold out by GATT, and one of the most atrocious things, because it's affecting the middle class. If that affected the wealthy, that would have been stopped. It would never have been allowed. But it didn't affect. You see, the trouble is it affected the invisible people of America. The policymakers of America are not in this audience. The opinion leaders are not in this audience. Mainstream media is not in this audience. They always stick together. Take a look at the Council on Foreign Relations. Take a look at the Trilateral Commission. Take a look at the Bilderberg Group. For years, if you mention those names, someone says, oh, you know, the John Birch Society. Yeah, there are people who are extremists from the right and from the left. But then you start to look at who keeps controlling everything we eat, who controls the fact that pesticide makers never can have a pesticide banned anymore, and if you do ban a pesticide, you have to pay them for their lost sales, lost profits. And then they have to be allowed to ship everything that you ban to another country and sell it there at an increased profit. I got to think something's unethical about that. So when someone wakes up one morning and they're just a normal person and they've never been empowered, and once people are in office, nobody pays attention to how they vote on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis, or how this whole conversion process starts taking place. And now these people get concerned and say, I think you've gone too far. You've gone too far in your lies and your deception. Dynamic, aggressive people become leaders. The three virtues of a dynamic, aggressive person are that they are supposed to have a larger vision of life. They're supposed to motivate us. That's why we are inspired by charismatic people. You do not have non-charismatic people who are leaders. They don't draw attraction. They don't connect and bond with you. These people are charismatic. Then they're supposed to be trustworthy. Trust is crucial. So we give them trust. We want to believe that they're going to honor their pledges. And then they're supposed to be functional enough to get the job done. So we trust that in the power they have, that we've given them. They don't have power. Power doesn't exist until your perception of it exists. It's all in perception. Take away the perception and the reality of power stops. And suddenly people have this overblown power because our perception of them is not real anymore. We go to the doctor and we think the doctor is this omnipotent person. Imagine that the doctor has had denied to him or her the right brain in medical school. You're not allowed to have the right brain in medical school. Everything is on left brain, pharmacology, diagnosis. Nothing is on mannerism, psychoneuroimmunology, mind-body connections, environmental connections, natural innate healing capacity. When was the last time you saw in any curriculum a study of innate healing? And yet, will they tell you that all healing, I repeat, all healing is natural healing? No drug can heal. Drugs will take over the process of an organ, a gland, or a system for a period of time, but it doesn't heal. And that's why we don't have healing within orthodoxy. We have intervention. Alternative medicine promotes healing. The use of herbs, they can heal. Astragalus, echinacea, palo d'arco, those are healing. We have vitamins, they're coenzymes, they heal. You can't produce energy if you don't have a B complex, because without the B complex, you cannot convert the carbohydrates into an active form of energy. The millions of mitochondria that are in the cells cannot create the energy unless you have the B complex. Paradoxal 5-phosphate from vitamin B6 is crucial for energy. Well, we don't have it in our diet. It's processed out. We don't have vitamin C in our diet. It's processed out. Isn't it interesting? I took a goat, and we measured a 40-pound goat, and it produced 60,000 milligrams of vitamin C in its own liver from glucose. Now, I got to wonder, if a 40-pound goat will produce 60,000 milligrams, how much would a person who's 180 pounds living in a very toxic environment, smoking, drinking, eating sugar? By the way, 3 ounces of sugar can depress your antibody activity for 5 hours by 50%. Now, if you're in a hospital, you're getting that sugar all day long. You have an immune deficiency disease. Could you imagine what's happened to your immune natural healing system? It's been locked out by the sugar you're given. And then you wonder why people die? They don't look at cause and effect. That's the miracle of the left brain. It doesn't have to look at cause and effect and be responsible for it. Protocol becomes more important than the patient. The patient's disease becomes more important than the patient as a whole. So you look at a kidney, you look at a liver, you look at a spleen. You don't see the whole person. You don't even ask them the relevant questions. We don't even know how to ask the relevant questions within medicine or in politics. I would ask Hillary Clinton. I would have said, Hillary, you're all for children. You are part of the World Children Program. Well, GATT is allowing 200 million children a day to be used as slave labor to produce cheap products in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka, and to be imported to the United States. How can you be for children's welfare and benefit and support child abuse and child slavery? Explain that to me. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe that isn't a relevant question. To me, it is relevant. Unfortunately, we don't even have people who are willing to ask the hard questions. They want to ask more politically correct questions. It's like these people have to be honored. I don't believe in honoring anyone who doesn't show that they honor us first. I believe that term limits should be a year. And I don't believe anyone who has more than $100,000 in net worth should be allowed to run for any office. And I believe that we should keep academic opinions as only one half of the answer of any equation. And they must be balanced with common sense and reason. Because I've never seen a scientific decision that was made that was adverse to the American public that ever had the American public participating in the decision-making process. So they exclude us, and then they talk about risk-benefit ratio. Whose risk? Ours. Whose benefit? Theirs. That's great for them, bad for us. As a result, nothing's going to be banned again. Do you realize how difficult it is to get anything banned that's bad? I've been trying to ban stuff for years and years. It takes 15, 16 years. You finally get one thing banned, and now they got 35 other things take its place. You're exhausted, you're tired, you're out of funds, and they come right back in and say, you did a good job, here's something else. We have to start using some of their strategy. No, we shouldn't. We don't want to be fascist. We got enough fascists in America. Everywhere you look. You got media fascists, educational fascists. We have become a society that is so fragmented and so isolated that we don't even look at what's real and honest. Hey, would you go to your mechanic to ask about brain surgery? Well, you would, but that's wrong, Dick. I was going to bring it up. You just have another story to tell the next time. He'll say, I went to that guy. He said. My ears were breaking there, and I'm charging you for that. And I got a B6 deficiency for my eardrums. God bless you, brother. Got it down pat now, Dick. but what we end up having is we have trust in doctors to tell us about health when they've never been taught about health. They have no courses in health. We should trust medicine to the degree that it has proven with its successes that it deserves our attention, reject what does not work, get a new direction. We should establish a model of health and have people who are themselves models of health as examples. Nowhere in America today can you find me a model of health that's being used as an example of health. Now, the people in this room, many of you are very healthy. You come from different backgrounds. Some macrobiotic, some natural hygiene, some vegetarian, some are in transition. But you're at least making an effort to try to get healthy. You see what happens when you change your diet. You see what happens when you start to juice and take live foods into your system. You see what happens when you do yoga and meditation. You see what happens when you focus on what's important for your balance. Disease can only exist where there is conflict. In the absence of conflict, there is no disease. So therefore, disease is a process. The person that's focusing on health understands that and spends a great deal of their time trying to rebalance themselves. They get out of their system what has created toxicity, and they bring in that which supports the natural healing process. Sometimes diet alone is not enough. I can take someone who has AIDS, advanced AIDS, and give them the best diet in the world. It will help stabilize them, but they don't get better. You give them natural therapies that are specific, herbal therapies, vitamin C drips, ozone therapies, and suddenly their immune system goes up and the disease process goes down. There's no one model that's all. You have to take from everything that's working out there. You have to be very open, very eclectic. That confuses medicine. It's not used to that. It does not take eclectic concepts. It's not in its philosophy. It's a single cause, single cure, single diagnosis, single drug, single disease. No such thing really exists. So I'm suggesting that we start to look at what we who are not in the power to make those decisions, but we who can make decisions and have the power to change our own lives. And by the way, there are more and more of us. I estimate that there are about 25 to 30 million Americans who are actively making changes in their life at different levels to try to be as healthy as they can be. We haven't spoken up. We're the silent revolution. We're so silent, we've passed the media, we've passed the politicians, we've passed everyone, because we're not announcing it in any great way. We're just making the changes. We're just getting on with our lives. But at some point, we have to say, look, if you've got this person here, if you've got Dick Gregory at 62, who is healthy, if you took his blood chemistry, if you looked in his body, you wouldn't see a chronological 62-year-old person. The likelihood is you'd probably see someone who is closer to 28, 30 years of age. So Dick isn't in the death process. Dick is honoring life because that's his diet, that's his attitude, that's the way he lives. Now you take someone else who's 62, and they're already being encouraged to get into their medical programs, to go to a place where they can have their whole life revolves around their dying process. Do you ever notice that? Talk to an older person. Everything's about their doctor, their drugs, their diagnosis, their aches, their pains, and they want you to feel something on their body. What if we started showing all these people who have reversed their disease process? Now initially there's denial. You never had the disease to begin with. That's the first thing to tell you. Now, of course, if they get rid of a disease, immediately they show that as a result of success. In anything the orthodox clinician does is clinical experience. Anything that the alternative doctor does is anecdotal. Same things, but two different approaches. I'm suggesting we need a complementary approach, taking the best of orthodoxy and the best of complementary medicine. They should work concomitantly. Some doctors are doing that. But it's more than medicine. Medicine is not health. It has nothing to do with health. It has everything to do with disease. Health is a separate model. We don't even have a way of determining health. We say health is the absence of disease. I can show you people who have no clinical symptoms of disease, but if you did a blood workup, you'd find they have about 30 to 40 different disease processes manifesting in their body. Sooner or later, they're going to manifest those diseases. So how healthy are they? Then I show people who have no physical diseases, but who have so much unrequited anger, so much rage, so much self-loathing or contempt, racist, anti-Semitic, anti-humanistic, that they're not a healthy person emotionally or spiritually. And when we start showing how we can balance the emotional, the physical, the spiritual, and the environmental, then you got people who don't need the $1 trillion a year socialized medical program that we're offering in this country. We don't have any models for that right now. I'm suggesting that within the next 2 years, if we start working together, we can produce some healthy models. And what I'm going to ask today is those in the audience who are interested in being in a documentary. My next documentary, which I'm starting in about 3 weeks, I'm going to take 3 families. It needs to be a family. I want to find a family in the lower income, middle income, higher income. And I want to show what can happen over a 6-month period when you help a person by giving them positive resources that can change everything in their life that's creating conflict, where you have solutions and not just a problem. Where people say, I can't be healthy because I can't afford it. I'll show you where eating healthy is less expensive than eating junk foods. Where people say, well, I don't know what doctor to go to. I'll show you it's not necessary to go to the doctor to get healthy. I'm not referring to acute illness where your life is on the line. I'm referring to things that you can make a change. Now, if a person has the will to change, and you're willing to change, and you're willing to be consistent about the change, and not just eat right one day and then eat garbage the next 4 days and wonder why you're not getting better, then at the end of 6 months, we can show this as a model. We can start to offer this to individuals. And then it's up to the American public to change. I do not believe that our policymakers will be making any shift in their agenda, because, Dick, you said it so correctly, this is not about Democrat or Republican. This is about people whose interest, and it's not just East Coast bankers, it's bankers everywhere. And it's not just the bankers, it's the multinational corporate mentality that doesn't honor the sanctity or sovereignty of nations, and certainly is not going to honor the human spirit and its sanctity and sovereignty. Thank you very much.